Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining me for this episode of Demystifying Money. I'm excited to talk about this topic today because it is one that we have not covered here on the show. And it's super important, especially for us parents out there, or if you have loved ones who have graduated from college, who are college bound. There is a lot more to the conversation, I think, that needs to happen than just getting a child into the right school. And so I'm very excited to be joined by my friend Katie Spillane. She is the founder of Careers Matter, which is a college to career coaching practice dedicated to helping undergraduates and new graduates land meaningful internships and first jobs with confidence and clarity. So she was in the corporate world mentoring early career professionals and saw a growing gap where students were graduating with degrees with no direction. Unsure how to stand out and navigate this process, she started this firm to help people get personalized one-on-one coaching to launch their careers. Katie, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited for this conversation, Misty.
This episode of Demystifying Money with Misty Lynch is proudly sponsored by Soundview Financial Advisors. Visit www.soundviewfinancialadvisors.com to learn more.
So I am seeing a lot of people on the financial planning end paying for college, and college is not, it is extremely expensive. It is just such a huge investment. And while I think that, like, before I went to college in 1998 and you get your degree and you go get a good job, and that was the path and that's what we were told. And I feel like things have been changing so much and so rapidly that it just might not be the same as if you graduated in the 70s, 80s, 90s and got your degree, you'd go get that good job and be all set. We're graduating with more debt, and the entry level jobs are either drying up, just like they're getting a little bit harder to find, and also the pay hasn't really kept up with the cost of education. So I think what you're doing is so important. So I'd love to hear a little bit more about you and kind of when you realized that this was something that needed to become, your career and your main focus.
Yeah, excellent question, Misty. So I've spent my entire career in recruiting and career services and career coaching. And so lived for a long time in the corporate world and private headhunting space within financial services. And then also worked part-time at an elite university here in Boston area doing career coaching. And what I saw and also do private coaching was doing private coaching for what I call experienced hires, parents. People mid to senior in their career. And I would work with these individuals. And then at the same time, I would get the question of like, wow, you helped me so much. Thank you. Can you help my student also? Right. They just graduated college and they can't find a job, or how do they find their first internship, or how do we navigate any of this? Like, they know they want to be a psychology major, but like, what can they do with a psychology major? What does that map to in the real world? And so I found a real need for this work, and quite frankly, I felt like everything I had done to date kind of led me here. So yeah, we've put together, my coworkers joke around that we're downloading my brain, right? There's a lot of stuff that's kind of floating around there that I've been doing with my clients for years, and now we're kind of systematically putting it together so that it can be repeated, and serve more people and help more students through the process. Because I think you're right. We're investing so much money in these undergraduate educations, and just getting that internship junior year, like so many of us did, it's just not enough anymore.
Yeah. No, I think and you mentioned something too about now, starting this and kind of downloading all of these things in your brain. And I think this is something for a lot of people who've maybe worked in corporate or other employers, worked in education and these other fields, and then all of a sudden they decide that there's something there that they could create their own consulting or coaching practice. And it's really kind of a leap from getting all of that information, all those things you've learned. And instead of feeling like, oh, but I've paid so much of my dues into this and I've gotten my education here, I can't leave it, you decided to move forward. So how has that been for you, making that transition, knowing what you know is so valuable, but making that into a job that then gets clients and pays is kind of a big transition.
It is. And I should also say, I've been an entrepreneur at heart my entire career also. I've done lots of side hustles and
Hmm.
built some, micro businesses here and there.
Yeah.
So it wasn't as much of a leap for me, but I totally hear what you're
Hmm.
saying. I think that, my like to answer your question, the true tipping point for me was I had two young children during COVID. As many of us parents know, we had, we're sitting at the dining room table on our
Hmm.
Zoom calls while our children were sitting next to us off camera, doing their schoolwork during the
Yeah.
day. And it just wasn't sustainable, right? It was not sustainable. We didn't know how long it was going to last, all the things. So I made a conscious effort to step away from corporate and move into a private practice and do individual coaching. So that was my stepping point at a very unique time in our world.
Hmm.
But I think it's something that I probably would have ended up doing anyways
Yeah.
eventually. It just jump started the conversation a little bit.
Yeah, and I do agree that a lot of these COVID did change a lot for a lot of us. I know, like if I had, I could probably do like a recap season just of people who changed during COVID, like
Yeah.
pivoted, decided
Yep.
they had to do something different, or traditional employment just wasn't working for like all of these people. It's
Yeah. We
massive,
can
but
have
I
a whole
do.
other conversation just on that.
Yeah, it's really, but it is interesting how we can kind of, when we have a moment to reflect, see where there are gaps and there is a need and that we can go fill that need. So, um, I think it's great that you did that. And yeah, some of us are just entrepreneurs at heart who are always doing. And so if you're one of those people and you're like fighting that urge and you're staying at your job, but you've got a few other different things going on, I do think that that's important to, not, kind of to take all of your experience, even those small businesses, other things you might have done, and think about how all of it makes sense. All of it can fit together when it comes to, designing your career or figuring out ways to make money and help people. All that experience matters, which is really cool. So, getting back to the students, though, what are some of the biggest gaps that you're seeing between what students learn in school and what employers want in those entry level candidates?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think the biggest gap is that a lot of our universities aren't what I call mapping majors to careers or what we call college to career. And so there's a gap between what they're learning in university that's very valuable, right? And they're being well educated, but there seems to be a blockage in how they translate that into moving their career forward or what they do with that information once they're in a corporate environment. So that's where we kind of meet those students to, again, I call it mapping,
Mhm.
college to career, major to career. I mentioned psychology earlier. It's my classic story. When I graduated, college many years ago, psychology major, like your options were you went to grad school, you got a PhD, you worked in private practice, like those are kind of the only things you could do.
Yeah.
Psychology is now one of the most marketable majors I think that exists between user design and user experience in the technology world. Consumer preference and do I want to buy this cereal box or that cereal box based on
Yeah.
the psychology of it all.
Hmm.
There's tons of marketing opportunities. HR now within a true corporate environment is 100% psychology focused. So that's just one example of, I think, taking, students often rely on their parents, right? For like, oh, like what can I do with this major? And our view of what we could have done with that major is now very different from,
Yeah.
what opportunities are available to them.
No, that's true. And I think, when I think back, my sister wanted to be a teacher her whole life. She went to school for education. She got her, master's, PhD, and it was very clear what she would be doing. And I have a poli sci degree.
Yeah,
And I was like, if you're not going to law school, there was no career
totally.
map. There was no like, and I ended
Yeah,
up,
yeah.
finance or whatever direction. It didn't really necessarily, I loved this. I loved what I was studying and I still find it, very fascinating how it kind of works, the politics and the markets and all of those things. But like, yeah, now there's so many different ideas that maybe mom and dad are not thinking that. They're thinking about what they did or
Yeah.
what, they've seen. And it's such a different, they might not think of influencer marketing with this behavioral, like all of these things,
Right.
that's just not going to come up. So I think
Yeah.
that is something that's really important that you're helping people do. And I know that there's a lot of pressure for young adults and a lot of stress about their first salary. I talk to a lot of kids, and think they're going to make $100,000 right out of school, if not more, is what they're thinking. And What kind of money mindsets do you see these students bringing into that job search?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's such a varied question, right? To your point of like, are you an education major or are you a finance major? It's a
Yeah.
huge, huge delta, right?
Mhm.
There are certainly are professions out there that students from elite universities are graduating and making easily six figures, right?
Mhm.
Consulting, investment banking, finance in general.
Mhm.
Some of the higher end tech positions, like they're making six figures. That's happening with a a 3.8, 3.9, 4.0
Yeah.
GPA, right? Like
Mhm.
it's a very elite crew, but it does happen.
Yeah.
Um, don't quote me on this exactly, but I think I saw a recent statistic out there that the average, and I hate that word because there's
Mhm.
so, like I said, so many variables. What type of university? Where are you living in the country? There's so many variables in there. But I think like $70,000 ish seems to be like the
Mhm.
livable salary that students can reasonably look to achieve out of school. And again, I'll just say it again, like so many variables, right? Where
Yeah.
you're living, what you're studying, what
Mhm.
career you're choosing. Lots of different things that go into that.
Yeah, I think it is, I remember like my first job out of school, I think I was making like 40, maybe 36 or 40,000. And,
Yeah,
it felt
yeah,
like a lot. And I feel like some some jobs are still, not six-figure job or ever going to be in certain areas, which hasn't really
right.
kept up with how expensive education is and how and cost of living in certain areas. So, how do you keep people confident when maybe they feel like they're comparing themselves to others or that they're falling behind?
Yeah, it's such a good question. And I think it's so hard right now in our country, in the United States, where undergraduate, new graduate unemployment rates for the first time in a generation are now higher than
Hmm.
the general population's unemployment rate. The new grad unemployment rate is running around 6%. General
Hmm.
population's, somewhere around 4 to 4.5%.
Yeah.
So that's a hard pill to swallow. To your point, like I just invested, upwards of $300,000, $400,000 in an education,
Hmm.
and now I can't find a job. I'm living in my
Yeah.
parents' basement or in my childhood bedroom. So it's hard. It's hard. There's no way to sugarcoat it. I think the key to it is the preparation of it, not waiting, like I said, until you're a junior, senior, or even, God forbid, post graduation to start looking for that first job. Depending on the industry, that can start as early as freshman and sophomore year. It's the key kind of time frame to start thinking about that stuff.
Yeah.
Again, in those elite positions of management consulting and finance, parents and sometimes students are shocked to find out. So right now, as we record this in November of 2025, I have my sophomore students, sophomore undergraduates preparing for that January 1st, February 1st, March 1st timeline when investment banks and management consulting companies are going to open up internships for summer of 27. So
Hmm.
let that sink in for a second. So in
Hmm.
spring of 26, we are going to apply and interview for jobs for summer of 27. That's how far in advance like this timeline has come to. Um, but I mean, to answer your question, I think it's preparation. It's not
Hmm.
waiting to the last minute. And if you do find yourself in that unfortunate situation where you have graduated and it's now 6 months out and you've got a good degree and you've got, you know,
Hmm.
good GPA and all the things, you did all the right things. You just have to keep at it, like keep your head up. It's hard. It's hard.
Hmm.
There's no question about it. Um, I do find I'm biased in my next statement here, but I do
Hmm.
find working with a coach helps, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes, mom and dad and, the student, especially when we're all back living under the same household, we're a little too close to each other, right? Like
Hmm.
we all have
Yeah.
preferences and ideas and thoughts around what each other should be doing. And sometimes having an unbiased, third party can help you through that process.
I think that's so important. And I don't think we mean any harm, or neither do our relatives. But, if you have grandma saying, just go get an internship, go get that, and then you'll get a good job. Or I know my dad used to tell me to go march into the CEO's office and shake their hand. And I'm like, I will get thrown out at security. That
Right.
is not how things work. And like in his head, that yes, it was.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I do feel like we have the best intentions, but sometimes a coach or somebody who's actually more ingrained in what's going on will have a better suggestion or idea for that. And I think that also goes for my very more senior or mid-career people who are in this unemployment place right now trying to look for
Yeah.
work, not ready to retire. It is difficult. And I think that that's where sometimes some coaching, even if you go back to your university or your alumni or whatever, what
Yeah.
resources do they have? Because you might have been in the job market for 20 years and now you're looking and things are just different. So coaching, I feel like, is super important to kind of help
Yeah.
you navigate this space because it's stressful and it's challenging. It's financially stressful, emotionally. I've talked to people who've applied for 20, 30, 40, 50, it feels like jobs,
Hundreds,
and
hundreds.
it's
Yeah.
really, really challenging. So I do feel like having somebody in your corner who gets to know you can be really helpful.
Yeah, and the other thing I think both for both scenarios you just outlined, whether you are a current student just graduated or an experienced professional, networking. So LinkedIn recently put out a statistic that said 65% of all new grad/undergrad positions start with networking, right? It starts with
Mhm.
that introduction, and we could start a whole other conversation around like
Yeah.
people with networks and
Mhm.
privilege and those that don't, right? That's a whole other piece of that. But in certain parts of the world, certain parts of the career world, the job search world, like that number is even higher, right? So there's certain industries where, I keep going back to management consulting,
Yeah.
but that's something I work a lot in, like the they're getting like tens of thousands of applications for these internships. The recruiting team doesn't
Mhm.
have the capability to like screen through them, never
Yeah.
mind talk to anybody, right? So
Mhm.
they're empowering their workforce, they're empowering their analysts and associates and sometimes even more senior professionals within their practices to go out and do some of this, first round screening for them, which is now we term as a referral, right? So that's
Yeah.
a whole process and a whole skill set in and of itself.
Mhm.
And for the experienced professionals, last time, some of them networked was like walking into a conference room and like work in
Yeah.
the room, right? And they might
Yeah.
be really good at that, but those opportunities are far and few
Exactly.
between now, right? It's more
Yeah.
about online networking and how do you navigate that?
Yeah, super important. And like sometimes you might be like, oh, I hate doing that stuff. But yeah, if this is what's working, like you kind of have to look at those skills or figure out like, okay, like everybody has even, yes, there are the privileged elite networks that people might have, but everybody has some sort of a network, like I didn't, and I think you just kind of have to figure out like where those people are that you can like, communicate with that maybe could be able to help you because you really never know where that next job is coming from. But you're right. A lot of times it is, um, that first round, that screening is a lot of candidates that are being chosen. So if you can stand out somehow, that'd be helpful. What are some other ways that students, can kind of set themselves up for success before applying for an internship or a job?
Yeah, I think starting LinkedIn early, right,
Mhm.
is so critical. It's the quite frankly, I think the easiest way to build, we throw away around
Mhm.
the term personal brand in business a lot now, right? But this is
Mhm.
literally the beginning of your personal brand. Whether you know that you're going into college as a poli-sci major and you know exactly what you want to do, that makes it easy. You can, map yourself out, post. I mean, we're not talking a heavy lift here. We're posting once a semester, right? Twice a
Mhm.
semester on LinkedIn, starting to curate your network in that space so that you have opportunities in that network that we were just talking about for your internship opportunities down the road. It's super simple, quite
Mhm.
frankly, right? Like you write an article for the school newspaper, post it onto your LinkedIn profile, right? Like it's basically just taking everything that you're doing in life, everything that you're later going to represent on your resume, and just putting it out there to the universe over time, right?
Yeah.
I think that's like the easiest, simplest way to get on the road to go. And I think it's also, you were talking a minute ago about networks and such, and I think the other population I just want to give a shout out to here is like around the idea of being an introvert. And
Mhm.
introvert and work is hard, period, right?
Mhm.
But introvert and networking,
Mhm.
that's like almost impossible. Like it can be anxiety driven, and especially in a generation of these, what I call post-COVID kids, right? We were talking about COVID earlier. Like
Mhm.
these are students who, were some of them were in the middle of high school, didn't get high school graduation because of everything that was going on in the world at the time. And there's pretty well documented out there, like there's a skill set that's missing, right? Like they
Mhm.
didn't get those socialization skills at a
Yeah.
key time in life. And so I do a lot of work with students that they're just not comfortable picking up the phone, or forget picking up the phone, like sending an email to
Mhm.
somebody they don't know. Like, how do we
Yeah.
do that? Why do we do that? Is they comfortable
Mhm.
doing that? And that all ties back into, LinkedIn, because at the end of the day, it's about your number of connections on LinkedIn, right? It's getting to that magic number of 500. And I always tell students when I first get on the phone with them, and they have 80 connections on LinkedIn. I'm like, if I go to your Instagram right now, you know more than 80 people. Right? You can cold outreach to somebody on Instagram. You can cold outreach to somebody on LinkedIn.
How important is it for, knowing that employers and anybody can really get a lot of information about people before they even meet them? How,
Yeah.
without, dialing everything down, how important is it to be, careful what you're posting when it comes to being somebody who's out there in the job search, knowing that people might look for you?
100% they will, no question. Are recruiters looking at you when they've got, hundreds, if not thousands of, people that have applied for the job? No, the recruiter, that first screen,
No.
they've got bigger and better things to do.
Mm-hmm.
But when it comes down to you and one other person to make an offer to, the hiring manager, whether it's in the policy or not that they're supposed to or not supposed to be doing that, it's happening without a doubt, right?
Yeah.
It can be as simple as like going to your Facebook or Instagram and just making it private, right? Then
Yeah.
nobody can see it but you. I mean, it's very, very simple things you can do to fix it. Sure, certainly, if you want to go scrub all, your college party, pictures off of it, that's a great idea too. But simply making it private is probably enough.
Yeah, no, I think that that's true. Like once it gets down to that, and I remember having like two candidates at one point when I was hiring in corporate, and I looked up both their social medias, and one of the guys, he had done some like volunteering at like a rape crisis center, and he'd done a lot of things in his community, and it was like showing up in that, and I was like, and in that, it tilted me in the yes direction, seeing like, oh, this is a person who's really engaged in his community, and he's doing a lot of important things and helpful. But then others were like, I don't know if this person's going to show up on Monday.
Right. No, totally.
Based on what I'm seeing. So it can go either way. So I guess, that's where that LinkedIn, like if you're looking at that as what you think employers are going to go to, and maybe your others are private, like share the things that you're doing that give somebody a clue about you. But also like know that people are looking.
Yeah, absolutely. This is like, related, unrelated. My favorite story when my children were little, I was trying to hide like a nanny babysitter, part-time person, some college kids to come by. And I met this young woman. She was lovely. I thought she was great. Again, ready to hire. I go look at her profile on, I forget what the app was even called, but some like babysitting app or whatever. And her picture is she's standing at a bar with a beer.
Yeah.
I'm like, you're applying to be my babysitter. Why? Like you're underage. What are you doing?
You're like, oh, but I looked really pretty that. Like, no,
right.
come on. Do a little better. Like, don't crop somebody out. Like, get a decent picture. Like, I don't know. There's things you could do on your iPhone, but I think it is important. And you're right, because sometimes it's easier to post all these things out to everybody, but writing an email to one person feels incredibly scary. So it's different. Things are just changing. And so I think that's really important for people to kind of, figure out. And you know what? There are networks for all of us, the introverts. There's silent book clubs out there where you can literally show up at a brewery with your book and sit and read with other people who just like to read. Highly recommend it.
Yes, I agree.
Highly recommend it. Very fun. And then there's other things, but what would you say is a mistake that you see students make in interviews that you wish you could fix for everyone?
Oh, that's a great question. What do I wish? It's a hard question. It's hard to put everyone in one little bucket, right? I think there's two things. One, there's presenting with confidence, right? So you can be saying all the right things with all the right words in all the right ways. But if I'm talking, and I end with, I think that was the right answer, all of a sudden, no matter what you said, it doesn't matter, right? And students do it all the time, and it's just insecurity. It's like, I think I said the right thing. Like, own it, right? Put a period at the end of the sentence. Own whatever you just said, okay? So that's in like the verbal communication part of it. The other part of it is, I know some of us are just listening to this podcast and some are maybe watching it, but what happens is on video, right? So students have pens and papers in front of them, and all of a sudden all I'm doing is staring at the top of their head. Right? And in an interview happens all the time. Like you would never do that in an in-person interview. You would never put your head down and start writing something. Right? Like eye-to-eye contact. And I get it's a little bit weird because to have eye-to-eye contact you on the screen, I'm not actually looking at the camera, I'm looking at you on the screen, which makes me look like I'm not looking at you. So it can feel a little awkward.
Hmm.
But basically looking at the camera is the short answer.
Yeah.
And, speaking up and have presence, and make me think you're somebody I want to, when you're interviewing someone, you're ultimately looking for like someone you're going to sit side by side, work with for, hours and hours and hours every week, right? There's
Hmm.
lots of research out there that you spend more time with your coworkers than you do your spouse and your family, right? So make me want to spend time with you, basically, right? Like be personable.
I like that. And I think that it's great that Careers Matter focuses on confidence building because there's a lot of people that I've worked with that were so smart, were so good talking one-on-one, could explain anything. And then I'd say, oh, could you do this on a webinar? And immediately it was like, no, I can't. And, a lot of times I'd push people to do it. There was one guy I pushed him because I knew he knew his stuff. And it was just really hard to practice being in front of a bunch of people without having you just can't rehearse it that well. You just got to keep trying and put your reps in. If you feel weird looking at the camera, put a picture next to your little camera so you're looking up. Do something to try to if it feels uncomfortable. And I talk to my kids about like eye contact and things like because
Yeah.
you're right. You could be saying the right things, but if it's too distracting that you're like looking down or something, it's not gonna matter. And so I think those tips are super important. And, it's a challenging skill set, but working to kind of improve that can go a long way. Because
Yeah.
sometimes the most confident person in the room and the loudest voice wasn't always the smartest guy
No,
in the
definitely not.
meeting,
Definitely not. We
but
know
he
that. Yeah.
sounded like he certainly knew what he was doing. And I'm like,
Yeah.
okay,
Yeah.
we need
The
other
other
voices to speak up here.
Totally. And the other thing that comes to mind too is, and I think this is a natural thing that people do, whether they're in person or whether on a Zoom call, is we have a tendency when we're thinking, right? Like we like look up to the sky. We're like, like what was I gonna say? Right? That's a natural tendency,
Hmm.
like I said, people do in person. But in this world of Zoom, and particularly in certain industries like tech and some other places, there's a lot of fraud happening, right?
Hmm.
There's a lot of people interviewing and getting jobs that aren't qualified for it
Yeah.
because either they were like reading the answer on, I mean,
Hmm.
I could be like reading a script to you right now
Yeah.
on the screen and you'd have no idea, right? Or I could be
Hmm.
Googling the answer like as I'm talking to you. And there's some platforms and technology that are working to like, minimize that.
Yeah.
But when you're staring off, like, are you like not paying attention to me? Are
Hmm.
you like reading something off the wall that
Yeah.
that you had prepared previously? So I think in a world of unfortunately a lot of fraud in the interview process,
Yeah.
larger companies and more smaller and medium-sized companies are just getting smarter around what they're allowing and what they're like screening out regardless because of
That's
that.
such a good point. That's such a good point. Because you're right. Are you looking at your phone? Are you looking at like or are you
Right.
just thinking? Yeah.
Yeah.
No, definitely some differences with the way that we have to communicate in interviews. So, super important. How do you coach students who maybe are afraid that they're choosing the wrong path or that they're
Great.
the wrong, that they're making a big mistake? That could be really scary.
It's really scary and happens all the time, right? Like the classic, senior that comes to me that was been pre-med for the last 3 years, and then all of a sudden is like, I don't want to go to medical school. What do I do now? Right? Like I've got 400 examples like that, right? Like,
Mhm.
I went down this path. I did my internship before senior year and I hated it. Like, what do
Mhm.
I do now? Right. So I think and this goes, I feel like we're having a little bit of a circular conversation in that like even today, if with all the resources that are available, students are still picking majors because like they took one class in high school that maybe they liked, right? Or their parents told them like, oh, you'd be good at this. And they're like, okay, like I guess I'll go study that, right? There's very little um like research and preparation that we do with students to like pick a major, right? It's just kind of like take a few classes and see what you like.
Yeah.
And so I do have some resources. Like one, I'll just say like ChatGPT like has it going on when it comes to career prep.
Mhm.
It's the craziest thing. But putting in some of like some criteria around like what do you like, and it might
Mhm.
pop out something that you hadn't previously thought of that you can explore. But to answer your question, I think the key is like early thought and methodical preparation around it.
Mhm. Yeah.
And that can take a lot of different forms, right? That can be internships, that can be, I mean, there's kids in high school doing internships now, which kind of blows
Mhm.
me away. Is I have high schoolers and they're not doing that, but like, which I'm like, it's a classic like cobbler shoes. Kids don't have any shoes to wear, but yeah, I think early preparation,
Yeah.
however you define early, whether that be just, exploring different ideas with your kids and exploring, exposing them to different opportunities that aren't just what mom and dad do,
Yeah.
is important. And then once you actually get into like, later years of high school and the early college years, there's lots of assessments, there's lots of online tools, there's lots of ways that you can like figure out like, well, if I'm, an introvert who likes writing and, not going to an office, 24/7, like what are my job options? Like, just some basic things like that that might open your eyes to different majors, which can lead to different careers.
Yeah. No, and I think of all the times when yeah, when I would like argue with my parents, they'd be like, "Oh, you'd make a good lawyer." So like that's where we went.
Totally,
That's where all
totally.
of us pain in the butt kids that were not taking
Yes,
over an answer probably headed straight to political science and law school
yes,
because that's just what we heard we might be good at. It's
totally.
crazy how that
Yeah.
happens, but I
And
like
then
the thought of like really kind of exploring more things or being aware and identifying things in advance
yeah,
and kind of trying to figure out what not that it was a
yeah,
waste, but I feel like sometimes that pressure, and I've talked to people who spent a lot of money on school and now later in their career, they're like, I'm doing something completely different than what I paid for and
yeah.
like felt like a
And
failure
I'll say
and
like
felt
that's
terrible.
okay too though. Like that's okay. So right. So I was a finance major. So
Yeah.
we're sitting on opposite sides of the world here, right? Like I
Hmm.
was a finance major. There's
Yeah.
tons of research. So I'm Gen X, right? So people of my generation,
Hmm.
we have 3 to 4 careers, 12 different jobs. That's kind of like the statistic out
Hmm.
there right now. Our first job out of school, we stayed for an average of like 4 to 5, 3 to 5 years, I'll even say,
Hmm.
right? Today's students are graduating, they're in their first job 18 months. They're off to the next thing,
Yeah.
right? They're just not sticking around.
Yeah.
So who knows how those numbers will play out, but it's not unreasonable to think that they're going to have 4, 5, 6 careers
Yeah.
and upwards of 20 jobs,
Hmm.
right? So as important as that first job is, and the earlier conversation we were having around money, your first job dictates your
Hmm.
first salary, and you, the financial planner, know,
Hmm.
right? Like that first salary dictates your lifetime
Yeah.
earnings, right?
Hmm.
Like it's very well mapped out. So I'm not going to minimize it. It's very, very,
Yeah.
very, very critical. There's no question about it, but it's not the end all be all. It is just your first job, right?
Yeah.
Like you fall into something, you're
Hmm.
miserable, we move forward from there. You're going to learn something, you're going to gain a skill
Hmm.
of some sort, and you're going to take that with you to your next job.
Yeah. Absolutely. A lot of parents want to help their kids. Sometimes they might putting a little additional pressure on them. What advice do you have for parents who are supporting a young adult's career search at this time when maybe they're, you know, confused, upset, seeing that, everyone's coming back to the house and not knowing what they want to do? How can parents kind of help this process move along?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the students I work with tend to have very engaged parents because ultimately the parents are usually paying me to
Hmm.
do the work with their children.
Yep.
So we do see, like I'm gonna call it like the tail end of this like helicopter parenting style that
Hmm.
we saw maybe about 10-ish years ago or 5-ish years ago. Still exists a little bit. But I think we've learned as parents to be maybe healthier helicopter parents, if that's the
Hmm.
thing, right? We're here to support our children. We can provide them resources, quite frankly, give them access to our networks where we have one that makes sense and is
Hmm.
useful. But doing it almost like with their permission at their pace,
Hmm.
recognizing that they are adults, right? Even though you may still be financially supporting them, they
Hmm.
are adults. They can make their own decisions. And at this point, if you've done your job correctly, you kind of let them fly a little
Yeah.
bit, right? To see where it leads. And they're gonna make mistakes, and that's okay, right?
Yeah.
One of my favorite coaching exercises is when we go through interview prep, right? And throughout the interview prep process, in any interview and you've ever done anywhere about anything, the last question is always about, tell me about something that went wrong. Tell me about your weakness.
Hmm.
What's your, what happened in a time when your project didn't meet a deadline? I call it the negative question,
Yeah.
right? And it's kind of the same idea of like employers want to understand, and this goes for everybody, college students, experienced professionals, whatever. Employers want to understand how you deal with adversity, right? How do you, when something goes wrong, are you like in the call, curled up in the corner crying, or like
Mhm.
are you like, okay, like let's get this project back on
Yeah.
track, we're going to fix it, we're going to move things forward, we're going to do it, right? So ultimately the question isn't about like how did you fail, it's about how did you recover and how did you
Hmm.
deal with it. And I think it's the same thing like that parents have to recognize is that in order to be successful, they need to fail. You
Yeah.
know, they don't need to fall flat on their face and fail out of college. I'm not saying like that level of failure,
Mhm.
right? But there needs to be some missteps around
Yeah.
like, I wanted to go to medical school and now I don't. Okay,
Yeah.
like that's a big deal. I get it. But we can get there. Like we'll figure it
Yeah.
out. We'll figure out the next step is. So being supportive, doing it on your students' terms at their pace, quite frankly, right? Like we as parents have lived experience that they don't, to state the
Mhm.
obvious, and we can often see what the path should be and we can,
Yeah.
lead them to the water, but they ultimately have to find their way down the path by themselves.
Yeah, very important. And you're right. There's always that question. And it's not to say, like, hey, what are you bad at? It's like, are you resilient? Have you figured out how to
Yeah,
pivot? Or is it, no, I've never really failed because, like, mom or dad made a phone call and they stepped in and helped me. That's not going to get any
totally.
points there. And
Totally.
also, yeah, parents going on the interviews with the kids. I mean, that is not showing
Oh,
that this person is an independent person who can make decisions and be trusted. I mean, we we want to help,
yes.
but
Yeah, we've all seen that famous, I think, I can't remember, was it Wall Street Journal or where it came out, but that famous article that, like, I don't even remember, was it 30% or some
yes.
very large percentage of parents were showing up with their students to corporate internships and yeah,
Yeah.
crazy. I
Yeah.
once had my favorite story on that front. I was working for a very large financial services company, and I had that hires hundreds, if not thousands, of interns every summer. And I had a parent. So to get to this internship, you have to be like 3.8, 3.9, relevant, very academically
Yeah.
talented, motivated to like accomplish to get to this point to be even offered this internship. And then I have a parent call me and wanting to understand what the food was in the cafeteria that could accommodate their son's food allergy.
Hmm.
I'm like, well, that's very sweet.
Mhm.
He's 21 years old or
Yeah.
20 years old. I think he can start to navigate this on his own, right?
Good. Yeah. No, he's not in third grade at a pizza party.
Yeah, yeah. But
No.
it's real. It is real.
Oh,
Those
yes.
things definitely happen. Yeah.
Oh man. All right. Well, I'd love to know, like, my last question is kind of what are some of the signs that a student might benefit from outside coaching and structured support? What are some things we can look out for if we think this might be the right fit for our kids?
Yeah, absolutely. Great question. So one thing we didn't talk about here, you alluded to a little bit, is that most, if not all any elite universities, have career services in-house available to their students, right?
Hmm.
And many of them do fabulous, fabulous, great work. So I'm not here to shame
Hmm.
in-house career services in any way, shape, or form. They're just not resourced to do the high-touch, one-on-one coaching services that we're doing at Careers Matters. I think that's like the biggest
Hmm.
differential. Is if your student just maybe would benefit from a little bit of extra handhold. Maybe there's some executive function concerns and we want to make sure that they have a map laid out for them,
Hmm.
or they just haven't been successful for whatever reason in getting their first internship. They don't know where to start. Like lots of times it's just like, what do I do first? How do I get
Hmm.
started? Right. So I think that's one piece of it. I think another piece of it is if they're in a major that's not like they're not an accounting major where you're going to go work like at the CPA firm for your internship and then you're going to go work for a CPA. It's a very well laid out, very well structured career process from your major, right? Some finance, positions, that have
Hmm.
a clear path to investment banking could be in the same bucket. Some science, right? I know I'm going to go to medical school. I know I'm going to go to law school. There's a path laid out in front of them of exactly what they should and shouldn't be doing at what times, right? But to the earlier example of like, as fabulous as it is that those psychology majors now have all these different
Hmm.
opportunities, that can feel very overwhelming also,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Right? Like it's, being the accounting major where you're going to go work for a big four, CPA firm,
Hmm.
there's some comfort in that because that's just what you're doing, beginning to end, right? Versus like, okay, do I want to work in HR or do I want to work in marketing? Do I want to travel or do I not? Do I want to live on the East Coast or live on the West
Hmm.
Coast? Like where are the opportunities for what it is you think you want to do? There's a lot of questions to explore there, a lot of like decisions to be made.
Yeah.
So I think in those cases where there's some ambiguity
Yeah.
or resistance to just getting started, they definitely can benefit from some of the work that we're doing.
So important. How can listeners connect with you and learn a little bit more about your business?
Yeah, absolutely. Always welcome. Just throw my email address out there. It's just Kathy with a K at careers-matter.com. Careers-Matter on LinkedIn, pretty much any social media. You can find us. Instagram, Facebook, we're all there. And our website is careers-matter.com. You can find us there.
Thank you so much. And we'll put all of that information in the show notes. And yes, parents, I mean, we are making, and I feel like a lot of times we think that this investment in our kids is getting them in the right school, paying for it. And I feel like that missing next piece could be what Kathy is talking about here, to actually make sure that they can transition into a career that they, can hopefully, enjoy and do. And I feel like becoming, being able to support themselves and build confidence is so important. So thank you so much for sharing all that information. And if you are a parent and you're looking to see, talk with your kid about the college planning process or your finances in general, head over to mistylynch.com. I'd love to, to meet with you and help you figure out what is the best way to finance all of these different competing goals and make sure that you not only can retire yourself, but you can help your kid launch their career at the start. So thank you so much for joining, and we'll talk again next week. Don't forget to share with friends and family, and together let's demystify the world of money. Knowledge is the key to financial empowerment.